I've done plenty of challenges over the years, but nothing ever reached the height of the jumpless Skywalker Saga series. Eventually, we were able to beat the full game without ever jumping, and I retired the idea, satisfied with where it took us. But I never stopped thinking and considering the idea that there might be another LEGO game out there that's possible to beat jumpless. Over the next year, I would try countless games. LEGO Indiana Jones ran into issues in the first level, the complete saga was already optimized and took well over 30 jumps, and I don't even want to think about Batman. However, there was one LEGO game that I had a sneaking suspicion could get further than the rest. A game so broken that sometimes just launching it caused my computer to explode. The bane of my existence, LEGO Indiana Jones 2. You already know of my love-hate relationship with Indy 2, so I won't bother recounting the many times it ruined my day, but what I will say is that this challenge shattered my expectations of what was possible. Normally, I approach these videos with the mindset of what is the minimum amount of jumps or studs possible, knowing that somewhere along the line I'll hit a roadblock. But as I quickly learned, this game was going to be possible jumpless, and I wouldn't rest until it was. Defining a jump within LEGO Indy 2 is easy. The game gives you a direct button called out for jumping, the A button. I switched this over to a useless button, so now we don't ever have to worry about accidentally jumping. The only other times you'll see me jumping in this video is when I exit a vehicle, which is done by hitting Y and is never used to gain extra height, and when I drop out player 2. Hitting the spacebar to confirm the dropout makes your character jump in-game regardless, but we won't be abusing this in any fashion. With that all out of the way, let's begin inside of the Crystal Skull Part 1, and probably the second or third hardest level in the run. Immediately, let me introduce you to our best friend and the leftover feature that makes this challenge possible, partner throwing. It's commonly known that you can whip your partner player to pick them up and set them down wherever you want, but if you hit the attack button as Indy is setting them down, you'll instead toss them towards whatever direction you're facing. If you just so happen to be up against an object that causes your player to slide when throwing, the second player will get launched straight up into the air. We can use this right away to get Mac over the wall of crates by launching off of this box, swapping back to Indy only to place it down in the proper spot to allow the AI to follow you up. Then we get to use our partner throwing for yet another important piece of tech. If a thrown player manages to land and die on top of flat ground, they'll actually get their respawn point set wherever they landed. In this situation, for example, we can toss Mac across the gap and set his respawn point on the other side, push the monkey bars down for AI Indy, and get past yet another seemingly impossible puzzle. We'll get to the more insane uses and manipulations of that trick later, but for now, we're gonna toss Mac at the wall of crates so Indy jumps up after him, re-pick him up, and throw him over once again to get our first super launch of the run and first major skip. Certain objects are easier to launch off of than others, with key turners, levers, and targets being the big three. You can gain some insane height with these, and we're going to use that height to hit an out-of-bounds trigger to enter the next room of the level without having to open the Crystal Skull box or do the first fight with Colonel Dietrich. Dietrich? There just so happens to be an out-of-bounds door super high above this room that puts you in the ending boss fight, and we can use the launch height from the target to position Mac in a very specific spot to hit it. You'll want to turn your graphics settings down to low, so the ceiling texture becomes a lower resolution, which reveals this kind of bracket pattern on the roof. By putting those brackets in the center of your screen and aligning the darker gray line at the top of your screen, you'll be home free to skip a long portion of the level. There's no jumping needed in this room, so we're home free to enter into a nuclear wasteland. Doomtown is one of my favorite levels in the game, because if you know what you're doing, it's literally 30 seconds long. After you respawn in LEGO Indy 2, your character flashes black for a few seconds. I don't know why this works, but by running against a thin wall or certain objects and pausing during the flashing, it lets you phase right through the walls. We can use this twice over to get Indy and the janitor into the fridge room, and then Indy outside, where he can dig up some TNT, drop it to the janitor, and end the level. Simple as that. The beat 'em up level has no required jumps, and neither do any of the vehicle missions, putting us in the final level of the first third of the fourth movie. Is that confusing? No? Well, how about a Nazi train mech? Is that confusing? Because what's confusing to me is why this train starts vibrating at a frequency unknown to man only because I have my VSync turned off. Or why sometimes when I throw Mutt at the chain, he decides to go so high in the air that it permanently blackens my screen. The train moves from left to right at random intervals, so trying to precisely throw Mutt at the train in a position where he won't die or get super launched into the air, but still be able to grab the rope was tedious. You have to pull each rope 3 times for a total of 6, and I don't think I've ever gotten more frustrated with this game than here. Every time an arm slams down, it stops your throw. Every time the train bounces too much, it stops your throw. Regardless, with enough solid tosses, you can finish it off, and we can move on to the next episode. There really wasn't a whole ton to talk about here. Level 1 really has only one unique thing going for it, with you having to put player 1 on the end of these monkey bars so player 2 defaults to grabbing the further ones, and level 2 practically plays itself, with the partner player making all of the jumps for you. In order to get to level 3 though, you have to do a launch in the overworld over the boulders since you can't jump on the pressure plate to destroy them. The next 3 levels are a beat 'em up with no jumps, a vehicle mission with no jumps, and a boss fight with, you guessed it, no jumps. And they had the nerve to call this game a platformer? Rest assured though, we get back into some more interesting stuff in the final third of the Crystal Skull, where we only have to play through a single level. That's right, we can launch as Oxley all the way to the top of the Aztec Temple, though I didn't have enough FPS to do it in one launch, so I had to split it into 2. Once you're there though, you can walk off the edge to die, and respawn clip through the center of the temple, landing in the boss fight. Now, why can't we do this in every movie? Well, the game checks to make sure that all 5 of the previous episode's levels are complete before unlocking the next. So while we can't skip to the end of Crystal Skull 2, Crystal Skull 3 doesn't unlock anything further, letting us skip to the end guilt-free. But this level and this boss fight suck a lot. Because the first 2 rooms boil down to pressing elevated buttons, we need to find some way to get both players on top of the rocks without jumping. We can break this down into 2 movements. Number 1 is getting Indy placed behind a rock so he paths over it when running back to player 1, and number 2 is whipping Marion and dragging her up there. With enough luck and RNG, you can get both players onto the buttons even though it is very touchy. This room took me a long time, but the next one took me even longer. Again, this comes down to dropping Indy onto a rock and then whipping Marion up to you. You have to be super careful though, because you absolutely need to hit all the buttons in one go. Otherwise, if you make the same mistake as I did, the last rock will be unbeatable, as there is no way to launch or gain extra height in the room. So in essence, just don't be as stupid as I was. The final room is whatever, you just kind of shoot rocks with a gun until Cate Blanchett perishes. Very climactic, meaning we're already halfway through the game, and we haven't even gotten around to the hard part. The first question I have when starting Raiders is what the f is Brody looking at here? Each of these photos are comprised of maybe 4 pixels max at the very most. How can you make out anything from that? The second question I have is when did Major Tote get dynamite? Yeah, level 1 is pretty easy, as there is literally nothing to jump on regardless, and for some reason, his TNT didn't break the things it was supposed to break, so I got off even easier? I guess that means we're on to Market Mayhem? We can respawn clip through the door and then find yet another use for the partner throws, becoming a walking human weapon. Whenever a partner player dies from being thrown, they just kind of turn into a walking hurt box, dealing damage every frame they touch another player. This makes defeating the waves of enemies super easy, as well as the Black Sword bandits who are normally quite annoying. But we have another problem. There's a couple of bandits up way top on the overhang, and the only possible launch in this room is blocked off by a ceiling, which rules out our main way of getting height. I tried a lot of stuff, like launching with a vehicle, walking up with a camel, and even something called a memory throw, which we'll touch on later. But you know what the solution ended up being? Literally a normal throw. Just throwing Sala at the perfect angle sent him straight onto the pavilion. Why do I even try? Well, I try because occasionally, this game has some pretty okay levels. And what do we do when we see an attempt at solid puzzles, decent platforming, and new mechanics? We respawn clip through the floor and skip all of it. Okay, well, half of it. The section with Marion is very touchy. You can't launch onto the statue's spear because this decoration instantly kills you, and even if you could, it's not like Indy can just launch himself up. I couldn't punch launch up anything in the room, memory throws weren't working, and I was out of options. As I was just about to give up and jump, I noticed that I could launch off of the statue's chain. Though this didn't really help because again, Indy is now stuck. Until I had a better idea. Whenever I dropped off of the spear, player 2 jumped onto it, which meant that there was AI pathing to grab it. I just needed to find the right bait. Moving left and right on the spear did nothing, but if I launched up to that one, then maybe... it'll work. We're now one useless vehicle mission and a boss fight away from finishing Raiders. And while the vehicle mission has no jumps, getting there was a bit of a puzzle as I had to throw Marion across the gap and do even more respawn clipping, but then we're just left with one fight. But it isn't your average boss fight, because normally they do make you jump. God forbid, right? This is easily circumvented though by doing a launch against this corner, which gives you enough height to push the box down, and by doing a miss target grab on the 2 objects you need for the second hit on the boss. Miss target grabbing is done by targeting something that is way too far away, but tricking the game into thinking it's close enough by panning over to an actual object that is close enough in the last moment. Then we press down 2 buttons and we're in Temple of Doom. Although the first level is a vehicle level, there is a puzzle we need to solve before entering. We obviously can't jump up to push that button, but we can do a perfect partner throw to make them press it for a frame before dying, which opens up the gate allowing us to miss target grab it and move on. We do some more miss target throwing in the second level to grab the furthest right Shankara stone, and another launch to get the middle one before we head over to Pankot Palace. This level is pretty similar to Market Mayhem, where we need to turn Willy into a human weapon to take out the Black Sword guards. Yes, even the one who decided to give up on his job and get stuck in the balcony. We do hit a minor snag in the following level, where I panicked and thought I couldn't launch anywhere in the room. I shortly after realized my V-Sync was turned on, so there goes another 20 minutes of my life. After some more missed target grabs to get the gears, a punch launch to get over to the bridge, and some broken water bottles, we're just one movie away from being done. One movie and one level. The hardest level we have yet to do, the Temple of the Grail. Before we talk about the level though, if you are enjoying the video, a subscription and a like goes a long way for a small guy like me. Just throwing that out there. It's one click of a button. You know, I can wait. Alright, we're good to go. This is another case of being able to skip right to the final level of the movie, but the process of getting there is kind of ridiculous. We have to do a launch through the transition zone of the smokestack, which requires crazy FPS. After a few tries, I landed the launch and made it all the way over to the mainland. Where I entered the bonus level and immediately exited to warp Indy to my location. I then grabbed a chair, which is an absolutely vital step, and took a boat ride all the way to the edge of Venice where I can finally explain what a memory throw is. Every time you throw something, the game keeps track of where your target reticle was, and uses it as the basis to throw said object. Here's the weird thing. Because partner throwing doesn't use a target, the game instead will use the last set target as the location for where the object is supposed to go to. So by throwing the chair at the plant, we can set our target and throw Sala all the way across this gap, where yet another respawn clip enters us into the Grail Temple. This game is wild. Once inside the level, we can throw Sala through these saw blades with no regard for his well-being, and defeat Donovan to open the door, where the level gets hard. Really hard. This was as close as I got to giving up, right here at the end. In order to cross the gap, you need to grab both of the ropes to build the bridge, but gaining the 1 inch of height you need is easier said than done. There's no launches in the room, you can't throw Sala across, and punch launching is a no-go. I tried doing a memory throw by mistargeting a bazooka, but there's nothing to hit on the other side of the gap, so that wasn't gonna work. I tried launching out of bounds in the previous room, but nothing came of it, and I would still have needed Indy to grab a rope himself too, so that's also out of the question. There was still one thing I could try though. I had at one point gotten a respawn clip into the lion's tail. While this itself didn't really do anything because you get cornered out of bounds, it gave me an idea. If I could somehow toe the line between being in bounds and out of bounds, I might be able to walk off onto the rope. While I was attempting this, I accidentally got a respawn clip launch straight up into the air and onto the rope. This was huge, but it only seemed to work on the left lion and not the right. It's here where I decided to use the respawn clip height to land on top of the lion head instead and try throwing Sala across to land on the other lion's head. When this didn't seem to be working, I went back to the pause clip method. When this happened. It's quite fitting to end off this challenge on a random solution that I didn't plan for and couldn't recreate. Pure LEGO Indiana Jones 2 vibes. Once we shoot our final bullet into Donovan's very canon dust figure, we could end off the challenge beating the full game of LEGO Indiana Jones 2 without ever jumping. What game should I try next, or what other challenge ideas do you want to see from me? Should I try to go for 100% without jumping? Let me know in the comments down below, but in the meantime, I'm gonna go probably jump on a trampoline or something. I deserve this.